So I know we have promised you a reception. We've promised you interactive and exciting exhibits. However, this birthday anniversary cake would not be complete without the frosting of our last two speakers. I know we're running behind. I'll give you a moment for a seventh inning stretch at your seat while the podium returns to the stage for our speakers. I'm looking to our conference services team to return our podium to the front. So you have a quick moment for a stretch, but you would not want to miss our final two speakers. So while the podium is coming to the stage, I will tell you that our first speaker is another Bell descendant and the president of the Alexander and Mabel Bell Legacy Foundation, one of our collaborators for this remarkable program today. So it is my pleasure to call Sara Grosvenor to the stage.
Good afternoon. I am so honored to celebrate the achievements of my great-grandparents, both Alexander Graham Bell and his miraculous wife, Mabel. We have spent several hours on the pursuit of ideas, protecting those ideas, and now let's just turn briefly on collaboration and focus a little bit on the power couple behind the phone, Alec and Mabel Bell. I just want to start with Alec and say that my father, Bell's grandson, often recalled that Grampy could no more stop inventing than stop breathing. With the introduction of his telephone in 1876, Bell essentially, as historians have said today, launched the modern telecommunications industry at a mere age of 29 and could have rested on his laurels. Instead, he continued inventing. With a restless curiosity, Bell went on to investigate new frontiers, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He was an optimist, a problem solver, believing when one door closes, another one opens. All told, he received 30 U.S. patents, with 12 in collaboration with others. Bell moved to Washington in 1879, in part to be near the patent office. Within 2 years, he created the photophone, sending voice over a beam of light to his cousin, who stood with a receiving dish in the window of another building 400 yards away. This wireless phone transmission was a precursor to fiber optics, an extraordinary accomplishment given that the technology was 15 years before Marconi's radio. Bell and his lab associates then developed and patented the graphophone, as we discussed today briefly, the first practical machine for recording sound. His Columbia Graphophone Company eventually sold music and evolved into Columbia Records, but without Bell. Bell, of course, had long been interested in the possibilities of flight, drawing designs for flying machines in 1878 while on his honeymoon. My great-grandmother was a saint. And in 1878, the Wright brothers were still schoolboys. Several years later, he conducted over 1,000 experiments in aviation, starting with tetrahedral kite designs, and was convinced by the strength and stability of those simple geometric forms. The designs influenced Buckminster Fuller 50 years later, as well as construction engineers today. At our family summer home in Nova Scotia in 1907, Bell's wife, Mabel, recruited, financed, and managed a talented team of engineers to collaborate with her husband, make him feel younger, known as the Aerial Experiment Association, or AEA. Mabel was the first woman in the world, essentially, to form an aviation company. The next year, AEA partner Glenn Curtiss piloted the June bug, which won the Scientific American Prize for the first public flight over a kilometer in the United States. The Wright brothers, you see, by that time had flown, but in private. The Silver Dart, another of the AEA aircraft, achieved the first powered, controlled flight in the British Empire in 1909. in Nova Scotia. So Bell's inventive spirit then turned to hydrofoils, boats fitted, that lift them above the surface for increased speed and efficiency. Together with Casey Baldwin, their HD4 set a world speed record for watercraft in 1919, reaching more than 70 miles per hour. Bell's hydrofoils paved the way for innovations in marine transportation, and their concepts are still used in high-speed vessels today, from America's Cup and Olympic sailboats to commercial ferries. Hey, Bell developed the metal detector in an attempt to locate the bullet to save Garfield's life. He also developed the respirator to assist breathing, which today keeps premature babies alive and saves so many lives during COVID. He built the first X-ray machine in Canada and received an honorary medical degree for his idea of using radium to cure cancer. He explored renewable energy, and my brother says that he coined the phrase greenhouse effect in 1911. But no exploration of Bell's achievements, would be complete with highlighting my great-grandmother, Mabel. While she lost her hearing in childhood from scarlet fever, she continued her studies, learning to read lips and speak 4 languages and understand them. Her spirit and love of education captivated Bell, and they married in 1878. She was his connection to the business world, and he was her connection to the hearing world. Mabel was both collaborator and champion, and she kept him grounded. She managed the family's resources, and her organizational skills and support fueled Bell's success. She was a powerful advocate for education and rural health, especially for women, establishing the first Montessori school in Canada, Canadian Nurses Association, and the precursor to the Canadian PTA. Mabel convinced her husband to save and help build the National Geographic Society. While serving as its second president, he urged the use of photography in the magazine to encourage its readers to explore the world and all that's in it. He would say, "Leave the beaten track behind occasionally and dive into the woods." He said, "Every time you do so, you'll be certain to find something that you have never seen before." So, like Alec and Mabel Bell, may we all have the courage to innovate, collaborate, and be agents of change for generations to come. And now we turn to another historic visionary, Mr. Vint Cerf.
Are you walking away with, is that water or vodka? Oh, no, the vodka comes later. Well, first of all, this has really been a wonderful afternoon, and I've taken notes like crazy because there are just so many rich ideas that have come out. So I'm not going to try to summarize the afternoon, but I would like to make a few observations. The first one, which I hope won't cause too much embarrassment, Bob Kahn and I did not patent TCP/IP. But what people did do is patent their implementations of it, and that was our hope. Our hope was that they would take the design and then build things that they could control, could patent, could turn into companies, and that's what happened. We didn't want any friction at all for the adoption of the protocols and their use. So that was a great success. Some people call Bob and me fathers of the internet, but then everyone says, who's the mother of the internet? And I think one answer might be my wife, Sigrid. Bob and I started that work in 1973, and our first son was born in 1973. He thinks he's the brother of the internet, and my brother thinks he's the uncle. So there's a whole family there. I want you to think a little bit about the milestones of invention that you've lived through in your own lifetimes, or that you at least know about. There are literally thousands of them, no doubt. I'm just going to pick a few because I'd like to suggest to you that some of these have been true inflection points in our society, and certainly the telegraph counts as one. And some of you, if you haven't read the book called The Victorian Internet, it's all about the telegraph. It's well worth reading. The headlines in there read in 1845, just like the ones that we see now about internet or artificial intelligence or blockchain, just changed the string. Expectations are enormous in those inflection points. The telegraph made a big difference. So did the telephone. We just heard all about that this afternoon. And the interesting thing is that telegraph required a professional to help you communicate. The telephone didn't. Then the internet comes along, and I can tell you in the early days of internet, you had to know something about computing to make use of it. But then the World Wide Web comes along, and suddenly anyone can use the system. Then the iPhone comes along, and suddenly it becomes wirelessly accessible everywhere. Oh, I have to tell you about Marty Cooper. Marty, of course, is the inventor of the mobile phone. He starts in 1973, same year Bob and I started on the internet. And in 1983, he turns it on, demonstrates it, and we turn the internet on. There's something interestingly parallel there. So I was introduced into Marty's phone in 1983. A friend said, come and see what I have. What is it? And he said, well, come to lunch and I'll show you. And so I show up and there's this thing sitting on the table. And I said, what's that? And he says, it's a telephone. I said, well, it's this tall and it's got a whip antenna. And I said, well, where are the wires? And he says, there aren't any. And I said, well, how does it work? And we go back and forth. And finally, I asked a question that my friend didn't know the answer to. And he said, why don't you call the guy that invented it? So I called Marty on this Motorola brick. And the first question I asked him was, how long does the battery last? And Marty says, oh, about 20 minutes. But you can't hold it up longer than that. It weighs 2.5 pounds. So World Wide Web comes along in 1991. The iPhone shows up and breaks all the wire barriers and everything else. Wi-Fi and Ethernet, of course, have been around. And now I'm in the middle of developing, well, I'll come to that in a minute. Let me go on to the big surprise part. I think the big surprise is that when the telephone was invented, it was intended to let people communicate with each other. When the internet was invented, basically it was motivated by computers interacting with each other. But we very quickly realized and discovered that it was the people that wanted to use that technology. So in 1969, the ARPANET, the predecessor to the internet, gets built. By 1971, Ray Tomlinson has invented network email, and of course it becomes the most popular application. It erased the problem of distance and time in the sense that you didn't have to be awake at the same time to communicate. You could send an email and the other guy could receive it at any when they were awake and they could respond. We didn't solve the problem of time zones, however. Those of you who have noticed, if you want to talk to each other at the same time, then you have to be awake, even if one of you is up at 3 a.m. But this human connection seems to be incredibly important in all of these things. So now, where are we in 2026? Humans communicate by text and speech. We're now communicating with computers with text and speech. In fact, we're having a trouble distinguishing the computer from the person. You remember the Turing test where a person was trying to figure out whether they were talking to a computer or a person? Well, there's a Turing test too. This is where the computer is trying to figure out whether it's talking to a person or a computer. And we're having trouble figuring that out. And so that's why sometimes when you get logged into a service and you put up a picture and you say, which squares have telephones in them, and it drives you crazy. So speech has now become a really important modality for interaction. Now we're at the point where the computers are not using special purpose languages to interact with each other. They're using ordinary text, and they are actually able to emulate people clicking keys or clicking mouse clicks on web pages. So now we have the computers that are behaving like people and using people's ways of interacting with computers. Those are called agents. And I would predict that over the next decade, the patent office is going to experience an avalanche of agentic proposals for patenting. And it's going to be a really amazingly complex and tempestuous time. I'm going to wrap up here with a couple of other observations which have allowed me to resonate very strongly with Alexander Graham Bell. First of all, his wife was deaf, and so was mine. She lost her hearing when she was 3 years old to spinal meningitis. And so for the next 50 years, she was a lip reader. And she was really good at it. And she went to school, raised 2 kids, had a family, all without being able to hear. And then she got on the internet and learned about cochlear implants. And in 1996, she got her first cochlear implant at Johns Hopkins. It's a 45-minute outpatient operation. And then she came home and waited for a couple of weeks for everything to heal. Then she went back to Johns Hopkins to be activated, which sounds vaguely religious, but actually it's all about just turning the speech processor on and allowing it to take in sound, do a Fourier transform to figure out which frequencies are present, and then stimulate the electrodes that are embedded in the auditory nerve with the implant in order to signal the brain, and the brain interprets those electrical signals as sound. That tells you a lot about how much we learn about how the brain detects and interprets sound. By the way, the original work on that was, guess what? Started in 1973. So there's something interesting going on about 1973. So she gets activated, and then 20 minutes after they put in the initial memory map, she picks up the phone and calls me. Now, at that point, we'd been married for 30 years, and we had not had a telephone conversation. So it wasn't a deep conversation. It was pretty amazing. Then I got home, and I discovered I had a 53-year-old teenager at home. I could not get her off the phone. She answered any phone calls that came in. At the time, I was senior VP of engineering at MCI. And so AT&T calls, and they want her to switch. So she says, yeah, hello, who are you? Oh, where are you? And I'm in India. Oh, India, that's one. You have a really good accent, you know what? So she went on for about half an hour. This poor soul on the other end says, you're going to switch, aren't you? And she says, no, my husband works for MCI, but thanks for calling. Then she decides that she doesn't want to let any decibel go undetected. So she wants to hear words that she hadn't heard. So she calls the library and says, can I sign up for recorded books for the blind? Now remember, she's on the phone doing this. And they say, well, sure, no problem. Name, address, phone number. Then they say, now you're blind, aren't you? And she says, no, I'm deaf. And there's this long pause while they're trying to figure out how that's going to work. She ended up listening to about 500 books. And now she's good at detecting accents and knowing when people mispronounce things. She also got a microphone that she could into her speech processor. So if she's in a gallery somewhere being escorted around, she can clip the microphone to a lapel or a blouse and hear better. She only knows one technical term. It's called the signal-to-noise ratio. And she knows if the microphone is close in the mouth, she gets a better SNR. Then she decided she needed also distance ability, so she gets an FM transceiver that has a microphone in it. And so if she were here, I'd be with a little transmitter around my neck that was sending an FM signal, which she can pick up from 150 feet away. She really likes that device because when we go to dinner, she leaves that on the dinner table and then goes to the ladies' room. And then she can continue to listen to the conversation while she's away. And we have to warn everybody, don't say anything you don't want Sigrid to hear because she's probably snooping. So we're all here benefiting enormously from so many different technologies, and many of them have been patented right here at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Long may it live. Thank you, and off to our session.
I told you it was worth the wait. Thank you to all of our speakers and panelists for sharing their insights and perspectives. Alexander Graham Bell's invention changed the world, but perhaps its greatest impact was the inspiration it provided. It reminded humanity that a single idea, pursued with curiosity and determination, can transform the way we live, work, and connect with one another. Innovation builds upon innovation. Each breakthrough invites another. Each discovery opens the door to new possibilities. Somewhere among today's inventors, students, engineers, and dreamers, may be the person whose idea will shape the next future of communication. And perhaps, like Bell's telephone, it will begin with a simple question. What if we could connect in a new way? So on behalf of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, I want to thank you, our audience, both in person and online, for being with us today. Thank you for hanging in there and your patience. Thank you to the USPTO executives, Communications Office, Office of Public Engagement, Conference Services, and Digital Media Services, all of those teams for their support and participation. And last, and certainly not least, thank you to our extraordinary collaborators. The Alexander and Mabel Bell Legacy Foundation, the American Intellectual Property Law Association, the IEEE, the Intellectual Property Owners Association, the Lemelson Center for Invention and Innovation at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, and the U.S. Copyright Office. Thank you all for being a part of our celebration. So please, we're going to adjourn to the upper atrium for that long-promised reception and some really engaging interactive exhibits. So thank you, and let's head upstairs.